I turned 68 this year, and not a single soul in my family showed up to the dinner I spent 2 weeks planning. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not even a quick call from my grandson to say happy birthday. I sat there in my little yellow kitchen in Tacoma, next to a lasagna that was still bubbling in the oven, pretending like I hadn't just been erased. My name's Diane. I was a nurse for 31 years. Raised my son Ben on my own after his dad left when Ben was 7. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I remember one year when I couldn't afford to buy Ben a birthday cake, we made one out of pancake mix and peanut butter frosting. He said it was the best cake he'd ever had. That's the kind of bond we had. Until he met Jessica. Ben married her 5 years ago. At first, I thought she was just quiet, a little guarded. But then small things started happening. Family dinners where the date changed last minute. Birthday parties I found out about after the fact, always followed by, "Oh no, you didn't get the text?" At first, I chalked it up to the chaos of new parenthood. But that was before this year. This year, I spent 2 weeks picking out every detail of the birthday dinner. Not just for me, but for my family. I made Ben's favorite garlic bread with real Parmesan. I bought coloring books for their little boy, Jackson, who just turned 3. Even pulled out the old record player Ben loved as a kid and cleaned off the Miles Davis vinyls we used to listen to on Sunday mornings. Jessica said they'd be there. Texted back, "Looking forward to it," when I reminded them the day before. I laid out the table early. Candles, fresh tulips. Ben used to love tulips. He picked them for me every year from the neighbor's yard. Always swore it didn't count as stealing if the flowers leaned over the fence. By 6:30, I'd reheated the lasagna twice. The wine was open. I'd even put on a new blouse. Soft blue with the buttons shaped like little seashells. My sister bought it for me last Christmas. Said it made me look alive. By 7:15, I texted Ben. Just a casual, "You guys okay? Everything all right?" No answer. By 8, I sat down alone and ate a slice of lasagna that tasted like cardboard. I tried to tell myself it was probably a scheduling mix-up. Maybe Jackson got sick. I left the candles burning anyway. The house was too quiet without them. Then, around 8:30, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Right there at the top of my feed was Jessica's smiling face. She was wearing sunglasses and holding a margarita in the backyard. My backyard. Except it wasn't mine. It was theirs, Ben's and Jessica's, 20 minutes away. The caption read, "Last-minute BBQ with our people. Grateful for warm evenings and family time." There were 10, maybe 12 people in the photo. A few neighbors I recognized. Jessica's sister, Ben's coworker Ryan with his wife and kid. Everyone grinning. Holding burgers and beers. A plastic kiddie pool in the corner where Jackson was splashing with another toddler. Laughter frozen in a snapshot I wasn't even close to. I stared at that photo for a long time. I zoomed in like a fool, looking for any sign that they had tried to call me. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe it wasn't today. But then I saw it. In the background behind the fence, my own tulip bush. The one I gave Jessica cuttings from last spring when she said she wanted to start a little garden. The same yellow blooms I was staring at out my window in full bloom. They were blooming in both places. At her house, and at mine. It was today. It was the same day. Same tulips. Same evening light. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen not to come. I sat there until the candles burned down, thinking maybe I was just being sensitive. That maybe it was all a misunderstanding. That's what I told myself, right until I got a message from Ben's number. It just said, "Mom, we figured you'd want to rest tonight. Jess said you've been forgetting things lately. Thought it'd be better not to overwhelm you. Hope that's okay." I read that message 6 times. Then I threw my phone across the room. I hadn't forgotten anything. But someone clearly wanted people to think I had. And that's when I realized Jessica wasn't just keeping me at a distance. She was trying to make me disappear. What I didn't know then was that someone else had been trying to find Jessica for years. Someone who had a photo of her in a wedding dress. And it wasn't the one she wore when she married my son. The night after the barbecue, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the glow of the hallway nightlight flickering across the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation I'd had with Jessica over the past 5 years. Every smile that now felt rehearsed. Every, "Oh, Diane, you're such a sweetheart," that now sounded like a script. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being rewritten, like a character cut out of a show mid-season with no explanation. The next morning, I walked to my neighbor Nancy's place and asked if she'd noticed anything strange lately. She's retired too, spends a lot of time tending her front porch like it's a confessional booth. She said, "You mean like Jessica whispering to that woman from Ben's office last week? They were out front, talking low. Something about you not being stable?" My stomach turned. I asked what else she heard. She hesitated, then said, "I didn't want to tell you, Diane." But she said something like, "If she starts asking questions, we'll have to just say she forgot again." I sat on Nancy's porch swing for 10 minutes, staring at the cracks in her driveway. I wasn't just being left out. I was being made into someone unreliable. Jessica was laying a foundation, slow and quiet, brick by brick, where if I ever pushed back, no one would believe me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went home and pulled out my old journals. I've kept a spiral-bound calendar every year since Ben was in high school. I flipped back through birthdays, appointments, milestones. Every single thing Jessica said I'd forgotten was written down, in my handwriting. Not in pencil either. I color-code my notes like a teacher. Green for birthdays, blue for medical, red for do not miss. There it was. Jackson's birthday, May 14th, 2 p.m. I had arrived at 2:40 that day because Jessica had changed the time on me the night before, said they'd pushed it to 3. By the time I got there, the cake had already been cut. Everyone was packing up. Jessica gave me that same pitying look and said, "Oh, Diane, you must have misread the invite. It happens." I remember standing there holding a gift bag full of little dinosaur pajamas, trying not to cry in front of her cousins. I called Ben that afternoon, straight to voicemail. So I texted. I said, "I need to talk. Face to face. Just us. Nothing dramatic. Just that." He replied 3 hours later. "Mom, everything okay? Jess says you seemed a little off at the BBQ. Maybe we can check in this weekend?" Office. That word hit different. Not sad. Not hurt. Office. Like I was a flickering bulb, a woman past her expiration. I didn't respond. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Ruth, my best friend of 40 years, who I hadn't seen in over a year because Jessica said Ben didn't want outside voices influencing family matters. Ruth answered on the first ring. I told her everything. Her voice dropped. "Diane, I didn't want to say anything before, but Jessica told me last year that you'd started mixing up names. She said she was worried and that you were showing early signs of cognitive decline. I thought she must have been exaggerating, but she said Ben agreed." I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. My hands just went cold. Jessica had been planting this seed with everyone, maybe even with Ben. Then Ruth paused and said something I'll never forget. "Actually, that reminds me. Remember my cousin Alan? The one who's a CPA in Portland? He called me last fall. Said he'd seen Jessica in his office. But the name she gave wasn't Jessica. It was Jenna Riley." I sat down on the floor. He recognized her from the pictures I posted a while back. You know? At Jackson's baptism. He said he was sure it was her. She came in with a man named Eric. Or Ethan, something like that. Said they were married and filing jointly. But that's not possible, right? She's married to Ben. My mouth went dry. No, it wasn't possible. Unless she wasn't Jessica at all. And Ben had no idea who he was really married to. I didn't go to sleep that night either. I couldn't. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, the glow from the microwave clock the only thing anchoring me in time. 3:11 a.m. I'd been sitting in the same chair for over 5 hours, still holding Ruth's words like a grenade in my chest. Jessica wasn't Jessica. Or maybe she was, but she was also Jenna Riley. And maybe Jenna Riley was someone else too. All I knew was that the woman who'd been erasing me from my own son's life wasn't just manipulative. She was hiding something. Something big enough to bury her name under a new one. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I called Ruth again and asked for Alan's number. She hesitated, probably worried about crossing a line, but I must have sounded serious because she gave it to me. Alan picked up on the second ring. He was polite but cautious, even more so when I explained who I was. "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said. "But yeah." I remember her. She called herself Jenna Riley. They filed jointly. Her and a guy named Ethan Carr. Paid in cash. I asked if he had the documents. He said he legally couldn't share client tax info, but he did confirm this. "The woman in the photo? The one with your grandson? That's her." So she had a different name and a different husband. My fingers started shaking so bad I dropped the phone. I felt sick. Everything I'd let go. The missed holidays, the cold stares, the shifting schedules, was suddenly lit up with new meaning. It wasn't just about pushing me away. It was about hiding something. And I'd been letting it happen, smiling through it like a good little grandmother who forgot things. But not anymore. That same afternoon, I pulled up to the public library and used one of their computers to look up every version of her name I could think of. Jessica Moore, Jenna Riley, Jessica Carr. I tried different combinations. City names, marriage records, real estate filings. Nothing at first. Then I typed in Jenna Riley Tacoma marriage license. And there it was. A record from 6 years ago. A marriage between Jenna Riley and Ethan Carr filed in King County. That was just over a year before Ben and Jessica, who I now realized might still be Jenna, got married in a beach ceremony in San Diego. I stared at the screen like it was burning. I remembered now. Ben had said Jessica didn't want a courthouse wedding. Said she wanted something clean and private. I'd thought it was romantic. Now I realized it might have been because she was never legally free to marry him. I printed everything I found and drove home. I was shaking the whole way, gripping the steering wheel like it might fly out of my hands. My heart felt like it was punching through my ribs. That night, I called Ben again. This time, I didn't leave a voicemail. I texted him a photo of the marriage record. Then I wrote, "Ben, we need to talk. Immediately. In person. Just you and me." He didn't respond that night, or the next morning, but at 4:32 p.m. my doorbell rang. It was Ben. He looked pale, his eyes sunken like he hadn't slept. He didn't even say hi, just walked in and said, "Where did you get that?" I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same one he used to do his algebra on, and told him everything. Ruth, Alan, Jenna, Ethan, the records, the names. His face went blank, then pale, then red. He just kept whispering, "No. No, no, no." Like if he said it enough, it would undo the last hour. "I don't know who I married," he finally said. "I don't know what this means." "I do," I said. "It means she's been lying to you since day one." He dropped his head into his hands. "I don't even know if Jackson is mine." That stopped me cold. I hadn't even gone there yet. I hadn't wanted to. But what he said next took everything I thought I knew and split it wide open. He looked up at me with watery eyes and said, "Mom, last month I found a letter hidden in her desk. It wasn't addressed to me. It was to Ethan. She called him Love. Said she missed their old life. Said she was sorry about the way she left. Said she'd fix it." I stared at him. My ears buzzed. "And at the bottom," he whispered, "she signed it Jenna." Before I could respond, the front door opened. Jessica stood there, holding Jackson on her hip. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't smile. She looked straight at me, then at Ben, then said flatly, "So, you finally found her." Jessica didn't say another word after that. She just stood in the doorway with Jackson balanced on her hip, eyes locked on Ben like a lion daring him to move first. I could see her fingers tapping rhythmically against the boy's back, like she was thinking fast, calculating. Ben didn't speak either. His face was unreadable, somewhere between heartbroken and boiling. The silence stretched so long I thought I might scream just to break it. Then Jessica shifted her weight, smiled thinly, and said, "Let's not do this in front of the child." Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. Like syrup poured over broken glass. I stood up and reached out my arms. "Let me take him. Jackson, come here, sweetheart." He hesitated, looking between us like he could sense something was wrong. Then he wriggled out of Jessica's hold and stumbled toward me. I pulled him into my arms, held him tighter than I probably should have, and whispered, "Let's go find your coloring book, okay?" I walked him to the den, heart hammering, and turned on the small TV. Left it playing quietly as I sat him down with some crayons and stepped back into the hallway. I closed the door behind me and stood there a second, letting the quiet press into my chest. Then I turned the corner. Jessica was still standing, arms crossed now, her gaze razor-sharp. Ben sat at the table, the printed marriage record in front of him like it was a loaded weapon. "You know I can explain this," she said. Ben looked up slowly. Can you explain why my wife is married to someone else?" Jessica let out a breath through her nose. "You think it's that simple? You don't know what I was dealing with back then. Ethan was abusive, controlling. He tracked everything I did. I ran to save myself." I don't know what I expected. A tear, a crack in her voice. But she was steady, confident, practiced. Ben looked stunned. "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" "Because I knew how it would sound." "You think this is the first time someone tried to turn you against me?" "Diane's not the first. She's just the loudest." And there it was, the pivot. She was trying to make me the villain again. I took a step forward. "You used my son. You used his kindness, his loyalty, his innocence. And now you're gaslighting him into thinking this is all my fault?" She turned to me, eyes gleaming. "He chose me, Diane. You just never forgave me for that." Ben stood. "Stop." His voice cracked in a way that startled both of us. "I don't care what name you used. I don't care what you ran from. I care that you lied. For 5 years. You let me build a life with you on a foundation of fraud." Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line. "It wasn't fraud. I loved you." "Loved me so much," he snapped. "You left love notes to your other husband in our guest bedroom." That got her. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You know what the worst part is?" Ben said. "I would have helped you. I would have protected you. But you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You let me make a fool of myself in front of my own mother, my friends, my kid." Jessica swallowed hard. I did what I had to do. I stepped between them. "You did what served you. That's the difference." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't know what it's like to be trapped, Diane." "No," I said, "but I know what it's like to be erased." And that was the first time I saw something crack in her face. Not guilt, not fear, anger, like I'd hit a nerve she'd tried hard to bury. Jessica turned to Ben again, her voice suddenly sweet. "We can fix this. Please, let's talk this through. Without her." Ben shook his head slowly. Then, with the kind of calm that comes only after a heart has finally broken all the way through, he said, "I already spoke to Ethan." Jessica froze. "You what?" she whispered. "I found his number in the return address of that letter. Called him 3 nights ago after Mom showed me the documents. He was surprised. Said you disappeared 3 years ago. Said you emptied the joint savings account and left him with 30 grand in debt." Jessica didn't blink. Her hands curled into fists. Ben kept going. "He also said something else. Something I didn't tell Mom until now." He reached into his back pocket, pulled out a small folded envelope, and slid it across the table toward me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a paternity test. Ben looked at me and said, "I had Jackson tested last week." My throat went dry. Jessica's voice went cold. You didn't? Ben nodded. I did. He looked right at me. He's not my son. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Jessica didn't move, didn't cry, didn't deny it. She just turned, slowly, and walked out the door without a word. Ben didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the spot where she'd been standing. And from the den, we heard Jackson's voice call out, Daddy? Ben stood up, chest rising and falling. Then he walked toward the sound. Ben didn't say a word when he walked into the den. He just knelt beside Jackson, who was busy drawing a green dinosaur with a blue hat. I stood quietly in the hallway, watching my son put one hand gently on the boy's back and say, Hey, bud. You hungry? Jackson looked up and grinned like nothing in his world had changed. Can I have chicken nuggets? Ben smiled softly, nodded, and said, Yeah, we'll make some. Grandma has the good kind. That broke me. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said we. Like the world hadn't just shifted under his feet. Like he wasn't staring down the fact that the child he thought was his wasn't. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that the little boy still needed dinner, still needed safety. And Ben, broken and blindsided as he was, showed up for him. That was the night everything began to shift. The next few days were chaos. Legal calls, emotional breakdowns. Jessica, or Jenna, or whatever her name really was, had gone silent. Blocked both our numbers. Didn't come for her clothes. Didn't ask about Jackson. It was as if she vanished on cue, like she'd rehearsed her exit. But we didn't chase her. Not this time. Ben filed for annulment within the week. Since their marriage had never been legally valid, the paperwork moved quickly. His lawyer also filed a petition for sole guardianship of Jackson. The DNA test helped, but so did the fact that Jessica never showed up to contest it. Turns out, Ethan, her other husband, had opened a fraud investigation of his own, tied to the money she took when she left. When the detectives found out she'd used multiple identities, they looped Ben in. It was messy. So many layers to her deception, it was hard to know where the real woman even started. But what mattered most was that her game had unraveled. By month's end, she was facing felony charges for identity theft and financial fraud across 2 states. And for the first time in years, my house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. Ben and Jackson moved in with me for a while. We fell into a rhythm. Morning cereal, drop-offs at daycare, late-night kitchen talks where Ben would finally say out loud the things he used to bottle up. I don't think she ever loved me, he admitted once, stirring a cup of tea with a hand that still trembled. I think she loved being believed, I said. And you were the easiest person to believe in her. He nodded slowly. And you were the only one who ever questioned it. There were moments that hurt more than I expected. Like the time Jackson called me Grandma Jess by mistake, and my chest tightened before I reminded myself that he wasn't to blame for any of this. He was just a kid caught in the storm of someone else's lies. But there were beautiful moments, too. Jackson started asking to sleep in Grandma Dee's room when he had bad dreams. Ben started calling me on his lunch breaks again, like he did before the distance crept in. And on my next birthday, my 69th, Ben cooked me lasagna. His hands burned the garlic bread. The table was too crowded with toys, and I couldn't stop smiling. We even invited Ruth and Alan over. Ruth brought a lemon cake. Alan brought news. Jessica had taken a plea deal. 5 years probation, court-mandated therapy, and barred from changing her name again without judicial review. She'd also lost all legal claim to Jackson. When I heard that, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just felt done. Jessica wasn't gone in the dramatic, cinematic way, but she no longer had a place here. Not in our house, not in our memories, and definitely not in the story we were building from the ruins. I still think about her sometimes. Not with hatred, with disbelief. That someone could walk into a family like mine, flawed, honest, trying, and choose to manipulate love like it was currency. But maybe that's the point. Some people lie to survive. Others lie to own. And when you're someone who's spent a lifetime earning trust the hard way, you don't let someone like that rewrite your ending. I guess the hardest lesson I learned is this: being kind doesn't mean staying quiet. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say enough. And now that I've said it, really said it, I'm finally free. If you've ever felt like someone tried to erase you from your own family, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I read every one, and I'd love to know I'm not alone. And if this story meant something to you, maybe subscribe and stick around. There's more truth where this came from.